Hello board brothers and sisters, I'm Adam Singer and welcome to another episode where I'll be letting you know of all the board games launching on Kickstarter and GameFound over the next week. If you're new to the channel, we do this every week going over all the upcoming campaigns, so if you want to stay up to date, this is definitely the place to be. But before we get started, I do like to go over some news and announcements that I just found out about over the past week, and we do have a bit of news out from CMON, with the first one being that they just announced their next Zombicide game. This one's going to be called DCeased, a Zombicide game. And this one is focused on the DC universe, of course, with all your favorite DC superheroes, both in their zombie and hero forms. If you're wondering how this one's going to be different from the other Zombicides in the Zombicide franchise, there's not a whole lot of info on gameplay just yet, but normally these games do play quite a bit similar to each other, but they usually do tweak up a few things or streamline some changes just to iterate on their system. But I do imagine that this one will play very similar to their previous Zombicide game, which was Marvel Zombies, because this one does share a designer. I don't know for sure if you'll be able to mix these together and have Marvel against DC, but that would be something really cool if they're able to do it. But if you are interested in it, they do have their campaign page up that you can go ahead and follow. And usually when CMON announces a campaign, it usually launches within a month, so I do expect this one in October. But that's not the only news out from CMON, because they did just announce a new game that's within the Cthulhu Death May Die universe. And I don't really know what that means, because the Cthulhu Death May Die universe is just the Cthulhu universe. So I guess it's just sharing some of the artwork, and I don't know if it means that some of your characters or monsters might transfer from one to the other, but I imagine they will do some overlap because that is something that CMON does quite a bit. But this one is going to be quite a bit different than Cthulhu Death May Die, because this one is a completely different game. And what I mean by that is that this one is actually a re-implementation of a game that is already released, which is called A Study in Emerald by Martin Wallace. So this one's a completely different designer, completely different game, just sharing a similar theme and now being produced by CMON. And yes, we do also have a bit of news that doesn't have to do with CMON, but this one isn't so much news. I just wanted to let you know that Vagrantsong did launch on Kickstarter last week. This was a campaign that slipped under my radar, so I just wanted to bring it up now because this is a game that has really good reviews and ratings, and I know a lot of people in the community really love this one. So if this is a game that you're interested in, you can go ahead and check it out now. If you're not familiar with this, this is a cooperative boss battler that takes place on a spooky ghost train. This one does allow players to play through a campaign, but this new version is also going to be introducing some shorter mode campaigns as well. But if you do want to know more about this one, you can check it out on Kickstarter now, and I'll try to remember to put a link in the description too. I just want to remind you that we are getting near the end of the month here, so if you do want to see a bit further into the future than just the following week, you'll definitely want to go over to Alex's channel over at Boardgame Co. and check out his video that will be going up very, very soon, which will be going over the following month and letting you know of some of the games to come. Alex puts out one of these videos at the start of every single month so that you can get a bit of an idea of what to expect, but he also has a ton of other content as well, offering you all sorts of reviews and playthroughs and top 10 lists, and just general commentary on the community as well. So if you're interested in all things board games, he's definitely got a ton of information on his channel, and he does excellent work, so you'll just want to check him out if you haven't already, and subscribe if you like his content. But that's everything I have for you for an intro, so let's check out the campaigns. And the first campaign we have launches on September 25th, and this one's called Forage, and this one's a solo game that takes just 5 to 10 minutes to play. And this is a tile placement style game, and the way this game works is that you're going to have a small deck of cards, with each of those cards broken into 6 different spaces. Each of those spaces will feature one of 3 different terrain types, but they can also feature 2 terrain types in a single space, which I will come back to in a second. But these cards are also double-sided, and on the other side of the cards, you're going to have a bunch of different possible goals. You're only going to be using 2 of these in the game, and then you're not going to be looking at the other side of the cards for the rest of the game, which means that you get quite a lot of combinations from game to game, since there are a whole bunch of different goals that you can potentially have, but you're only going to be choosing 2. You don't actually have to complete these goals in order to win the game, but they do offer you some additional forms of scoring victory points. The way that you do win the game is by adding up the numbers in the top left corner of the 2 cards that you randomly drew, and then you're going to be trying to get that many victory points before the end of the game. The game starts with just 1 card out on the table, but you're always going to have 2 in your hand, and every single turn you're just going to be choosing one of these 2 cards to place. Anytime you place a card, it must overlap one of the cards that are already placed out on the table, and your main goal here is to try and overlap like terrain because that's going to allow you to gain victory points. But anytime that you don't do this, it can actually cost you victory points. The game does give you a little bit of flexibility with those dual terrain spaces, allowing you to overlap those with either of those two terrain types, but this doesn't gain you victory points, it just allows you to continue without losing any victory points. And the way that you're going to be tracking your victory points is with these different dice. So anytime that you make a successful overlap, you're going to be putting a die there at the value 1. But the cool thing here is that if you're able to make additional overlaps on that same space, that die is actually going to increase exponentially, allowing you to score even more points if you're able to overlap a same location multiple times. The die you place on a terrain does match the value of the terrain, and whenever you place a die on a location that does have two terrain types, the colored die that you place there is going to make that space persist as that color. Of course, you do want to be very careful with how you are overlapping the cards because, like I said, if you overlap spaces that don't match in terrain, you're actually going to be losing victory points, and you can see that here with the -2 with the mouse on it. And this is very costly because not only is it costing you victory points, but it's also costing you a potential die that you could be using to gain victory points. If you ever run out of dice, then you don't get to put more dice down until you free them up, so you do want to keep these in your reserve as much as possible. The game continues like this until all those cards are placed, and then you're going to be adding up all your victory points from the dice, as well as those goal cards that you drew at the start of the game, and then subtracting any victory points lost. If your total victory points are higher than the sum of the victory points outlined on your 2 goal cards, then you do win the game. And one thing to note about this one is that it is a 3rd installment in a trio of games, and I do expect that the other 2 games will be available as add-ons in this campaign as well. So if you're interested in this one and you're interested to check out what else they have to offer, I do have a link to this campaign in the description below. Also launching on September 26th, we have League of Dungeoneers, and this plays 1 to 4 players and takes about 90 to 180 minutes to play. And this one is a cooperative dungeon diver campaign game that's been getting a lot of praise in the community, with a really nice rating on BGG as well as a ton of positive reviews. And I personally think that this one does an incredible job delivering the experience that it's trying to deliver, and for that reason, this one is my own personal pick of the week. But I do want to mention that this one does deliver a very particular type of experience that's very similar to that of a role-playing game. So if you are a fan of RPGs, you might really like this game. But if you're not a fan of RPGs, you might still like this game, but just keep in mind that this one does require you to keep track of different stats, and there is a little bit of bookkeeping. But at the start of the game, each player is going to be building up their own character by combining different classes and races. And this is going to give you different benefits and limitations, but it's also going to set up your starting stats, gear, and your action points. Players will be able to upgrade their characters' skills and gear throughout the game through finding new items and opportunities, but then also by gaining experience points, which you'll be able to spend for various upgrades. But like I said, this one is a campaign game, and you're going to be traveling around on a main map, traveling to different towns, settlements, and discovering different dungeons along the way. But when you're at these different locations, there's going to be all sorts of opportunities to pick up different quests, and these will usually require you to jump into dangerous dungeons. And one of my favorite aspects of this game is the way that the dungeons work, because rather than the scenario booklet just instructing you how to set up a particular dungeon and what's going to be in there, you're actually going to be curating a specific deck by adding certain cards together to create that dungeon deck, and then you're going to be starting on a starting tile, and then any doors on a tile, you're actually going to be splitting that deck up, putting part of it at each of the doors. Anytime that a character moves into one of those doors, you're going to be revealing the top card of that deck, finding the appropriate tile, attaching it to that door, and then splitting the remainder of that deck up for any doors that are on that tile. This is a really great design to introduce variety and randomness into each of these dungeons while still creating a dungeon of a certain difficulty and feel, since you are curating the deck according to that dungeon. You're just randomizing some of the cards and the way that they come out. These cards aren't only used to generate the rooms and corridors within the dungeon, because each of these cards will also let you know if there's any special items or monsters that are going to be spawning within that room. You're just going to be adding them as you draw the cards, but this is where another layer of variability comes into play, because you're also going to be drawing the monsters from a monster deck, and there are a ton of different monsters and items that you can discover in this game, so it's always going to be exciting to see what turns up. The players aren't in these dungeons just to fight monsters and find gear, although those are some of the perks, Because players are trying to fulfill certain objectives for each of these individual dungeons, you're going to be searching the rooms trying to find the proper rooms to fulfill those objectives and to accomplish the tasks that the objectives want you to accomplish. Players will have to be careful as they're navigating through the rooms because some of the rooms can trigger different events, and there can also be traps to discover as well. Whether you discover those through a keen eye of observation or blindly stumbling into them is entirely up to you and your character and the stats that you decided to invest in. Players are going to be rolling the 10-sided scenario die at the start of their turn, and there's a bunch of different outcomes that can happen here, but it could depend on the dungeon you're in, the monsters that are currently revealed, or even any effects or status effects on your character. But if you do roll a 9 or a 10, that's going to trigger the roll of the threat die. And threat is something that I haven't talked about yet, but it's something that's going to be increasing throughout the game through different battles or through different consequences of actions that players take. But anytime that you roll the threat die, if you roll a value that's lower than your total threat, that's going to cause some negative effects for the party, but it usually does then reset your threat by some amount. Players are going to be spending their action points to perform different actions like moving around on the board, attacking different characters, or performing any other special actions. Most of these actions do involve some sort of skill check or dice rolling, although it's not always the case. The dice you get to roll when you attack will depend on the type of attack you're performing, as well as any gear or special actions that you might have. It's also important to note that when you are in combat, the way that you face does matter, so you don't want to end up with your back to the enemy because that's going to make you more vulnerable. But of course, if you can sneak up on your enemies, that does give you an advantage. As you'd expect, a player can spend their action points on whatever combination of actions that they want to perform, but a really cool thing here is that you can actually combine action points together if you want to perform things like a power attack. When you attack, you're going to be rolling your various dice, trying to meet a skill check, and then if you do meet that, you're going to be dealing out the amount of damage, which could be a set amount or also determined by a separate dice roll. But the enemies aren't just going to stand there and let you attack them, and this is another aspect of the game that I really love, and this is the way that the characters activate, because once you do have enemies out on the board, every character is going to be putting their chip into a bag. This includes the player's characters as well as the enemies. Some characters could actually put multiple chips into the bag if they are really quick or have a keen sense of observation, which does increase the chance of their chips being drawn potentially multiple times. The players are going to be drawing from this bag in order to determine which order the various characters activate, so the players aren't going to get their turn while the enemies just wait. Instead, any character could be activated at any time, creating a much more interesting environment that I think adds to the realism and immersion in quite a big way. Players are going to be continuing the game like this, exploring the map, discovering new dungeons, storylines, as well as learning more about their own individual characters. The new expansion is actually also coming with a second printing of the game that's going to be adding some corrections and streamlines to the rules. But the expansion is going to be adding even more variety to the game with new types of dungeons that you can discover, new enemies and characters, as well as new locations and quests to visit. I really like what I'm seeing with this one, and I'm happy that they're continuing to iterate on it as well as add new content. So if you think this one looks like something that you might be interested in, I do have a link to the campaign in the description below, and of course you can click that link to get notified. Also launching on September 26th, we have Diatoms, and this plays 1 to 4 players. It takes about 30 to 45 minutes to play, and this one is a competitive tile placement game where players are actually competing to create art out of microscopic algae. Players are going to be graded by a combination of objective cards that are going to be placed out at the start of the game. And you're going to be trying to fulfill those various requirements in order to try and maximize your points. This is a game that plays over 8 rounds, but something that's really neat about this game is that it actually has 2 layers of tile placement. Players are going to be taking turns placing a tile into this hex grid, and depending on the combination of tiles that you link together, that's going to determine what type of tokens you get to add to your supply. And this is where that second layer of tile placement comes into play, because each player is going to have their own personal board. We're going to be able to place these tiles, which represent all the various algae. You're going to be placing these to try and fulfill those objective cards that I mentioned before, and players will be putting all of these out on display at the end of the 8 rounds and scoring them based on the patterns they're able to fulfill. The player with the most victory points wins the game, and if you are interested in this one, I do have it linked in the description below. And launching on September 26th, we have Hello Kitty: A Day at the Park, and this plays 2 to 4 players and takes just 25 to 45 minutes to play. And this one is a campaign that I thought was launching a couple weeks ago, but it's actually going to be launching this week. So I did already post coverage for this one. So I'll just go ahead and roll that previous footage for you now. And this one is a competitive game that's pretty easy to get to the table because this one has a very light rule set where players are going to be choosing their character at the start of the game, each with their own unique special abilities. But then players are just going to be taking turns placing tiles, gaining bonuses for the tiles that they placed, but then also performing a movement action with their character out on those tiles, also gaining resources for whichever tile that they decide to stop their movement on. And the whole reason that players are trying to collect all these different resources is to complete the different sets of icons that are depicted on each of their victory point cards. Completing those cards will grant you those victory points at the end of the game. And the game just continues like this until all the tiles are placed, and then the player with the most victory points at the end of the game wins the game. And if you're interested, check this one out. I have it linked in the description below. And also launching on the 26th, we have Aberration. And this one plays 1 to 4 players. It takes about 60 to 90 minutes to play. And this one is a cooperative tower defense bag building game, and this is also the game this week that I am personally the most interested in. So for that reason, this one is also my pick of the week. Yeah, we're going to have multiple picks this week. Super scandalous, I know, but deal with it. And there's a few reasons that I'm interested in this one, but the main one is that I just think it's really well designed and I really like how all the mechanisms work together, especially the way that you build up your character, because in this game, players are going to be playing as different heroes, and you're going to be building up their stats throughout the game. Each hero is going to have their own set of abilities and actions, as well as their own stat tracker. But in order to perform the different actions of your character, you're going to be drawing different colored tokens from a bag, and then you're going to be combining those in different combinations in order to activate your various abilities. The cool thing here is that these tokens that get added to the bag are the same tokens that are used to measure your individual stats. Each token is going to be associated with one of your stats that are located on your player board, and these stats can do different things like increase the amount of tokens you get to draw from a bag, but they can also increase your proficiency with certain actions as well. So it does have this full circle effect where when you're adding a particular token to a bag, you're also increasing your stat of that particular color. But in addition to these 4 colors of tokens, there's actually 2 other tokens you could potentially draw from your bag. There's the white token, which is your hero's token, and if you draw that, you can spend it to activate any ability for free. And then there are black tokens, which will be added to your bag right from the start, and you could get more added throughout the game. But these have 2 different effects. They act as wilds, which is really nice because you can use them to activate any of your abilities, but then they also cause corruption, and this is going to push your corruption token up your corruption track. And when that gets to the top of the track, you're going to be drawing a corruption card that will have some sort of negative effect on the players, usually increasing that fear track, but it can also grant players with a special ability which also makes them stronger as the game goes on. And this is actually called Aberration in the game. I'm just calling it corruption because I don't know what aberration means. But as players are taking these turns and spending these tokens to upgrade themselves or perform movement or attack actions out on the board, you're going to be putting these tokens into your discard location, which will eventually make their way back into the bag, but while they're out, it's going to be limiting the options that you'll be able to draw. But like I said, this is a tower defense game, and players are going to be trying to both protect the village in the center of the board, as well as these different locations represented by these tokens that you can find scattered along the paths. A really neat aspect of this tower defense game is that you aren't limited to attacking from these various locations because you can move your characters around on the board, and players can also influence these little yellow meeples, which represent villagers, and you can take advantage of them as well in order to fight back against the enemies. Players can also use these villager meeples in order to activate special actions located at the center of the board, and this can allow you to do things like light fires, fortify the different locations, or even gain item cards, which will open up special actions and abilities that you'll be able to use outside of your normal actions. All of these smaller locations located out on the board can also grant players with special effects or actions if they're able to claim them, but all of these are unclaimed at the start of the game, and players are going to have to move their character to that location and then spend the required tokens in order to activate them. Players do want to be quick about this, and you might want to pick and choose which ones that you activate first, because if the enemies are able to get to those first, they're going to actually corrupt those locations, removing the possibility of ever claiming it for yourself. And if this happens too much, it can also trigger the end of the game, with of course you being devoured by all of these beasts. After all the players have performed their actions, you're going to move on to the enemy phase, and you're just going to be drawing an enemy card from the deck, which is going to dictate how the enemies behave and what happens when they activate. But then you're also going to be drawing a card from one of the decks, which is going to upgrade one of these creatures, making them even more stronger and difficult to deal with as you play throughout the game. So not only are the players getting stronger, the enemies are getting stronger as well. And I really love games that do this, where the stakes are just constantly increasing as the game goes on. Of course, these enemies having their way and taking out different locations or dealing damage to either you or the city are going to be causing negative effects to the players, mostly in the form of additional aberration or corruption added to either the character or increasing the amount of fear on that fear track. The game continues like this until the players are able to fight off those enemies and claim those locations long enough to move their survival track up all the way, or of course otherwise being completely overrun by rabbits and boars from hell. This is another game that I think looks like a ton of fun. It has a lot of aspects that I really love with the bag building, as well as every character and creature just getting stronger and stronger throughout the game. And if you also think this one looks like a ton of fun, you can find a link to it in the description below. And of course, follow along so that you'll get the free pin added to your pledge if you do decide to back it in the end. And the next campaign we have on the 26th is Tiny Mini Golf. And this plays 2 to 99 players. It takes about 20 to 40 minutes to play. And the reason this has such a huge player count is because this one is a roll and write, which means that a lot of the game can be played concurrently. And this one is a campaign that I did think was launching a couple weeks ago, so I did already film the footage for this one. But I did catch the change in date quick enough that I didn't actually post it yet, so this is all brand new footage. So even if you watched my previous videos, you wouldn't have seen any content on this game, which pretty much means I could have just rolled that footage without saying any of this, since no one would have really known since I haven't shown it before. Although the change in clothing would have been a little abrupt, so that's pretty much the only reason I'm saying any of this. And this one is a really clever roll and write. I'm really interested with what I'm seeing here because this is a game where each player is going to be getting a grid of paper and you're going to be building up your own mini putt course. At the start of the game, each player is going to be choosing a starting location and an ending location for their hole. And then each round, there's going to be 6 dice rolled. And then players are going to be drafting 2 of those and drawing those different icons on their own player sheet. There's a bunch of different icons you can choose from. There's water hazards, sand traps, and then different shapes that you can use to block off sections of your board in order to create that mini putt track. But the game just continues like this over a series of rounds, rolling those dice and then using 2 to draw on your own player sheet until each player has fully completed their mini putt course. At that point, each player is going to be passing their sheet to the player next to them, and then that player is going to have to actually play that course with a little bit different rules from this part forward. Each player is going to be starting from the starting location and then choosing a direction and an amount of power that they want to swing their club. If you want to swing with enough power to just move 1 space, you're going to be rolling the green light-powered die. If you want to swing 2 to 3 spaces, then you're going to be rolling the medium yellow die. Or if you want to swing 4 to 12 spaces, then you're going to be rolling the red die. And the difference between the different dice here is that the more powerful dice do have more risk associated with them, because the green die actually has 4 spaces where you'll just move the amount that you want. And then the yellow die only has 2 spaces, and then the red die only has 1 space. But the red die is even less forgiving because the yellow die can only add up to 2 to the power that you declared, but the red die can actually add up to 4. This means if you're going for those more powerful hits, you could quite easily end up over swinging. Once a player does get their ball to the hole, you're going to be adding up how many swings that actually took, and that's going to be your score at the end of the game. And it's the player with the lowest score that wins. And if you are interested in this one, you can check it out. I have it linked in the description below. Also launching on September 26th, we have an expansion to the game ERUNE, and this plays 1 to 5 players and takes about 60 to 150 minutes to play. And this new expansion is going to be called the Light and Darkness expansion. But if you're not familiar with the original game, this is an app-driven one versus many campaign game. The app's going to be doing most of your heavy lifting and keeping track of different events and decisions, but it also does allow the ability for the game to be played completely co-op if you don't want to have one person acting as the enemies. Something that's really neat about this game is that each player is going to be choosing their own individual characters, their unique skills and abilities, but then they're also going to be keeping track of all their stats and items on their own dry erase player board. The front of the board is going to allow you to give your character a name, but then also track your health, your mana, your different stats and experience points that you're gaining throughout the game, as well as to write down any weapons or gear that you might have equipped and any items in your inventory. The back of the board also provides a few areas where you can keep track of your various quests that you're able to complete, as well as any skills or spells that you may have gained or mastered as you played throughout the game. Like I said, the game can be played entirely co-op if you do want to play the game that way, but there's also a bunch of other modes of play as well. And if you do want to play with one player acting as the enemy, they're going to be playing from behind a player board, but at the start of the game, they also get to pick 2 skills that they'll be adding into their arsenal and they'll be able to take advantage of throughout the game. And that player is not only going to be controlling and activating the various monsters that appear throughout the game, but they're also going to be playing a little bit of Dungeon Master as they do control the dungeon and also reveal certain aspects of the game and the story to the character as it progresses. This means that they'll have additional information as to when certain events or traps could trigger, and they can use their monsters to try and push the other characters into those situations that benefit them. Before a round starts, the app's going to read out any special events that might trigger based on the current state of the game, but then you're going to be moving into the enemies phase where if you do have a player acting as the enemy, they're going to be activating their various monsters that are out on the board, moving and attacking according to those monsters' special abilities, but also intertwining those 2 abilities that they chose at the start of the game. But this player isn't only limited to performing actions during their turn, because they may also intervene during the player's turn, depending on if certain events trigger or if more of the dungeon is revealed, because it's up to the enemy player to handle all of that. But after the enemy's turn, each player is then going to get a chance to perform 2 actions on their turn, and each player is going to be performing movement with their movement die, which is starting as a 6-sided die, but then it can be upgraded throughout the game, which can potentially open up more movement points as the game goes on. Players are going to be using their actions to do things like prepare or engage in battle, and you're going to be rolling dice of different colors depending on the gear and weapons that you have, with some of these colored dice being more desirable than others. Depending on your character, you might also have access to various spells, and of course you're going to be spending mana in order to activate these. If the players are able to get a little bit of breathing room from the enemies, they can also use an action to search the room for various items, or to perform a rest action to heal some of their points or mana, and also potentially recover from some negative effects. The game continues like this, alternating between the players and the enemies, but there is also one more thing that I want to point out that I think is really, really cool, and that's that players can actually make a pact with the enemy, which will gain them a special ability card. These are usually pretty powerful and give you certain effects, but they also get triggered at certain situations that the players don't necessarily always control. Players will be trying to use this to their advantage, but once they fully utilize that card, it's going to be coming back to the enemy player with a special ability that's going to make that enemy more powerful. So there is a trade-off here, and the enemy player is going to want to be strategic when they do make these pacts. The new expansion is just going to be adding more of everything into the game, so you can just expect a lot more characters and enemies and dungeons and quests to discover. But they also did a lot more work on the narrative, making it a lot more rich and also introducing some new mechanisms along the way as well. If this sounds like something you'd like to check out, or if you already own the game and you want even more to experience, you can find a link to this campaign in the description below. Also launching on the 26th, we have Pugly Pirates, and this is a game for 1 to 4 players and takes about 45 minutes to play. And as you'd expect, this is a game where players are going to be playing as canine pirates, and you might be happy to know that it does live up to its name with the inclusion of a ton of fantastic puns. This is a competitive game where each player is going to be playing as their own puppy pirate crew, and each player is going to have their own personal player board that's going to keep track of their ship and its stats, which includes its movement, its strength, its luck, and agility. All these stats can be upgraded and modified throughout the game, and you can also temporarily boost any of these stats by overworking your crew. This, of course, does make them a little bit more unhappy and can cause a mutiny as you play throughout the game. Players are going to be playing over a series of rounds, alternating their turns, and on a turn you're going to first start by determining the amount of movement that you have. Each player is going to have a base movement, but then you also have your multi-use workers, which can be placed on your shipboard to increase your overall movement stats. Players will then be spending these movement points to move around to the various islands out on the board in order to do things like find resources, items, money, cannons, and other treasures, or even to bury treasures on other islands as long as they're not spotted by their opponent pirates. Whenever you leave an island, you can also leave one of your crew members behind in order to take control of that island. This is one of the ways that you can win the game, but it also frees up a space inside your shipboard, which can then be used to hold other items or gear that you find along the way. Other players could try to take the control of the island away from you, but in order to do that, they need to put more of their crew members on the island than what you had left behind. But of course, this wouldn't be a proper pirate game if you couldn't fire those cannons, and there are opportunities for that because there'll be various trade ships that can spawn out on the board, and players can try to attack these ships by rolling a die in combination with their stats with a push your luck mechanism to determine if they win that battle. But players can also attack each other as well with the same mechanism, and combat is one of the ways that you can win the game because this is a game that actually has 3 different win conditions. You can either defeat enough trade ships, bury enough treasure, or control enough islands, or in other words, marking your territory. Players will also want to gain an advantage over their opponents by gaining certain items or upgrading their ships, which they can do by spending a very valuable resource known as bones. And if players do find themselves in a particularly tight spot, like I said, you can overwork your crew to temporarily raise some of your stats. And the way that this works is that you're going to be spending points on your mutiny track, moving down that track, in order to temporarily pump one of your stats upward. This does come as a trade-off because if you do move down that track, that's going to cause you to lose movement points on your turn. But if you're able to keep your crew happy and move that track all the way up, you'll actually get additional movement points. Of course, if it gets all the way to the bottom, you're going to have a full-fledged mutiny on your hands, and there will be some negative consequences you'll have to deal with. The game continues like this until one of the players is able to fulfill one of those 3 win conditions, and that player wins the game. And if you want to learn more, you can check out this campaign. I have it linked in the description below. Also launching on September 26th, we have Defenders of the Wild, and this plays 1 to 4 players and takes about 45 to 90 minutes to play. And in this game, players are going to be working cooperatively as animals with their own animal faction. Players are going to be working together to try and protect their land from pollution and deforestation, and they're going to be doing this by rewilding various factories, building up camps and protective walls to keep those outsiders out, and then fighting against giant mechanical beasts. Because yes, this is a game about animals versus machines. The game is going to be played on a hex board with different terrain types that will have implications on movement depending on the faction that you're playing as, because each player is going to be playing as a unique faction with their own unique benefits. Players are also going to have a deck of cards which represent the defenders in their faction. Players are going to be using these to perform their actions throughout the game, but essentially players are trying to win the game by building up all of their camps and then rewilding any of the factories that are built by the machines. The players can lose the game in one of 3 ways, either if the 7th factory begins its construction, a 7th location starts to become toxic, or if a certain amount of their defenders are killed. The game's played over a series of rounds, and each round players are going to be choosing a defender card from their hand to play in secret. You're just going to be putting this down and then simultaneously revealing once all the players are ready. Players are then going to be taking turns performing actions with their chosen defender, with each of these defenders having a different amount of action points available to them, and also an icon representing the type of animal it is. But this icon's important because you can also exhaust any other cards from your hand matching that icon in order to gain additional actions on your turn. Some of the different actions you can perform are to move your characters around out on the board, heal any damage, build up a camp, or move to a camp that you've already built. But one thing that's important to know when you're building a camp is that you need to win the trust of the animals in that region. In order to do this, players are going to be trying to build up support with the various creatures in the land, and players can gain this support by doing things like clearing pollution in the area, fighting back against the mechs or those factories, and even flipping a factory over back to its rewilded side. But in order to do that, you need to clear all of the other tokens in the area. Players will want to keep in mind where those enemy mechs are out on the board, because if you're performing various actions either on or adjacent to one of those spaces, this could inflict damage on your character, and you're going to be inflicting that damage by rolling the damage die. For every 3 damage that a player gains, that player is going to have to discard one of their defender cards because that defender has then been killed. And like I said, if this happens too much, this could trigger the end of the game with the players, of course, losing. But after all the players have performed their actions, it's going to move on to the mech's turn, and you're just going to be resolving the mech card and following the sequence of events, which is going to do certain things like spread them across the land, cause pollution, or even build factories or walls that could inhibit the movement of the players. In addition to the overall goal of the game, players can also complete smaller objectives in order to gain special items that they can use for additional bonuses and actions on their turn. And if you're able to be efficient with all of this, then hopefully you'll push back those mechs and take back the land. And if this one does sound interesting to you, you can check it out and find out more information in the description below. We have Cretaceous Rails, and this plays 2 to 4 players and takes just 45 to 120 minutes to play. And this is a competitive game where players are going to be running their own individual resorts. You're going to be building up a tableau to gain special effects and abilities that will augment your powers throughout the game, but then players are also going to be building a network of train rails out into the Cretaceous forest. The purpose of this is to bring tourists out on that train in order to see the dinosaurs that match their color, because that's going to be gaining you victory points throughout the game. But there are a few other things that you can do as well, and players will be using worker placement in order to perform their various actions. The way that the worker placement works in this game is that you're going to have an action grid, and you'll be able to put your worker between 2 of those actions in order to perform both of them. These actions can allow you to do things like draw new cards into your hand or issue them into your tableau in order to gain those benefits and upgrades, expand your rail network deeper into the forest in order to open up new options that you can perform with your train, like clearing out brush and tree tokens, taking passengers out on safaris, or even capturing dinosaurs to take back into your resort. Each player is also going to have a set of tokens representing their train and all its cars, and you'll be using these cars to hold passengers, but then also anytime that you're removing brush or dinosaurs from the forest, you'll also need to take up an entire car just to lug that back. And if you ever want to unload your train, you do have to forego one of your actions during the worker placement phase, but luckily there are actions and upgrades that do allow you to add more cars into your train. The game continues like this, with players gaining victory points for the different tourists that they're able to take out and see the dinosaurs that they like, as well as any victory points gained from their tableau and different upgrades that they've made to their own personal resort. The player with the most victory points at the end of the game wins the game. If you're interested in this one, you can check it out. I have it linked down below. And launching on the 27th, we have a new expansion to the game, the Shivers, which plays 2 to 5 players and takes about 45 to 90 minutes to play. And this new expansion is just going to be adding more content and mysteries into the game. But if you're not familiar with this game, this is a pop-up mystery game that has multiple paths to victory and also encourages a lot of role-playing. To start the game, players are going to be choosing one of the many mystery adventures and then playing through a series of episodes in order to try and solve that mystery. The episode will provide the instructions you need to set up the game, which is going to include one of the many pop-up boards. And there's going to be a whole selection of different boards like this with different rooms and locations that you'll be playing through as you play through the different adventures. And these can be further mixed up by sliding different boards or cards into the back of these, depending on the situation or the actions that the players take. And players will essentially be taking turns performing one action on their turn in order to investigate certain areas of these pop-up rooms to find clues and solve puzzles to move them forward along in the campaign. And when it comes to the story, there is always one player that's going to be acting as the storyteller, and it's going to be this player who's going to be providing all the information and new discoveries, and they're going to be acting as any of the non-player characters as well. But this is a game that also has a lot of opportunity for role-playing, because each player is going to be choosing a character at the start of the game, and each character is going to have their own set of abilities, but also a bio and a set of fears that players will be able to work into their role-playing experience. As players explore and discover new information, it'll be up to them to decide how they want to apply that information in order to try and solve the mystery. And this is where a lot of the role-playing comes into play, and players will be able to decide what they want to do and then tell that to the storyteller, who's going to be making a decision based on that player's skills or stats and the knowledge that they have, and of course the action that they're trying to do. And whenever this is the case, the storyteller might instruct the player to roll a die to determine whether or not their action was a success or a failure. And there are a few different dice that the storyteller can grant you with varying levels of success and varying severity of failures. If players are able to make it through to the end and solve the mystery, then they win the game. And if this one does sound interesting to you, you can check it out. I have it linked in the description below. And launching on September 28th, we have an expansion for the game Deep Rock Galactic, the board game. And this plays 1 to 4 players and takes about 60 to 150 minutes to play. And this new expansion is going to be adding a couple new mechanisms to the game, but mostly it's just going to be adding new missions, enemies, and content for you to mix in, and some new items and gear as well. But if you're not familiar with this game, this is a game that players are going to be playing over a series of missions, and the mission is going to outline the type of objectives that you're trying to complete, as well as the setup and any unique rules for that mission. But this is a game that plays over a series of rounds, alternating between the player's phase and the enemy's phase. And during the player's phase, players are going to be taking turns performing a number of actions on their turn. And there's a few different actions that you can take, but players are going to be using those actions to move around on a board. But the interesting thing about the board is that it's actually going to be made up of a few different areas that may or may not be connected. And players will actually have a mining action where you can actually mine for hexes to connect various areas in order to allow you to move there. Or you could also use your mining action to clear obstructions or even find resources. Whenever you do mine, you're going to be rolling the mining die and then hoping for a success. The players can also use their actions to move to locations to find certain items that could be things like grappling hooks or explosives that will allow them to move over these gaps in the map or even blow up obstructions in your way. But in addition to the various items that you can find, of course, you can also gain weapons, and all the weapons are upgradable in this game, and each of the weapons will have a range, a number of dice that it allows you to roll, and in this game you're just going to be rolling that number of die and then hoping to land on a success, which would allow you to inflict a hit of damage. But each of these weapons will also dictate what type of colored dice you can roll when you are making an attack with that weapon, and the different colored dice represent different types of ammunition. Each of these will have their own unique effects and advantages. It's going to be up to the players to take advantage of that, but anytime you shoot your weapon you will be spending ammo, and players can restock their ammunition, heal their hit points, or even upgrade their weapon by spending various resources. Of course, there are also actions that players can use to help their teammates because this is a cooperative game, so if your teammate takes damage or gets knocked down, you can use one of your actions to pick them up or heal them with various items, or if you're in a safe location, even have a blood transfusion. And the game contains like this, alternating back and forth with players trying to complete those main objectives and trying to do it before any of the players die or if they run out of time, because players will only have a limited number of rounds in order to complete their objectives. But if they're able to do that, they will win the game and can move on to the following mission. And if you're interested in this one and want to learn more about the game and the new expansion, I will have it linked in the description below. And that is everything I have for you this week. Don't leave yet because we still have a few awesome giveaways to announce, and we do have quite a few giveaways to announce in this video, just like last video. I know we're doing a lot of giveaways, and if this is all too much, let me know and we can stop. It's totally fine. That was a joke. Please don't leave or unsubscribe, especially if you want to win any of these, because the first giveaway we have is for a pledge for Dragon Eclipse. And I should say that these are all the easiest giveaways to enter ever. You don't have to like or subscribe or do anything like that, but I do always appreciate it. But all you have to do is leave a comment down below, and I'll let you know exactly what to leave in the comment for you to get entered into each of these individual giveaways. But like I said, the first one is for Dragon Eclipse, and this one looks like a really fantastic game. I'm super excited for it. This is a deck building type game that is inspired by games like Pokemon, because in this game players are going to be playing as tamers as they explore a world, uncover its mysteries, and also capture and train different creatures. Players are going to be fighting these creatures amongst each other in order to progress the story. But my favorite aspect of this game is the way that the deck building works, because each of your individual creatures will have a certain elemental type that they'll be associated with it, and this is going to dictate what type of cards they're able to use. But there's also going to be cards that can be used with any creature, and then there's also cards that can only be used with that specific creature. But you're going to be exploring the world and capturing these creatures and discovering these additional cards and investing in the various creatures that you want to invest in. And what's so cool about this is that each of those creatures are going to have their own individual decks that you have built for them over time. And I just love how all of that comes into play with you having more history with some of your creatures than others, and then using that along with their different decks that you've built in order to decide which ones you want to have ready on hand for the various battles and events that you're going to be going up against. I don't normally play solo games, but this one might convince me, but I am hoping to play the co-op mode if possible, because this one does also support a co-op mode where each player will be building up their own individual crew of creatures, which I think adds a really cool dynamic to the game, with each player building up their own party of creatures that's different than the others. And this giveaway is going to be for the standard edition pledge, which actually gets you quite a lot, because it'll get you that core game and all the unlocked stretch goals, as well as a PvP mode and even a roguelite mode. And for this giveaway, I do want to do something a little bit different and send you over to the Board Game Garden, because Jenna over there does fantastic work, and she actually did a live playthrough of this game because she does board game content, but then she also does live streaming every single week. So if you're interested in any of that, you'll definitely want to check out what she has to offer. But I'll leave a link down below in the description linking to her video where she played through the first portions of this game, so you can get an idea if this is a game that you're interested in. But just leave a comment on her video saying whatever you like. But also, if you want an idea, maybe you could let us know what your favorite Pokemon is. For myself, that's a pretty tough question, but I've always started the game with Bulbasaur. He's my favorite out of the 3 starter Pokemon. Maybe it's because he's so stoic and cool, but he also, I think, looks the coolest out of the 3. But if I could choose any Pokemon at all, I'd probably go with like Jolteon or Zapdos. Of course, Mewtwo's always an excellent choice as well, but the most interesting Pokemon is definitely Mycelia. And this is another campaign that I'm personally really interested in and do plan to add to my collection. But if you're not familiar with this game, this one features a really cool drafting mechanism where you're going to have 3 piles of cards out on the table. And when it's your turn, you'll be able to look at one of those piles of cards at a time and then decide whether or not you want to take it into your hand. If you take it, your turn ends and you get those cards. But if you don't take it, you're going to be putting it back down, face down, and then adding an additional card. And there's no backsies, so if you don't like what you see in the following deck, you can't go back and take that one. So this adds a little bit of a push your luck mechanism, and I'm always a fan of push your luck, and I think this one does it in a very unique way, but then also does drafting in a very unique way, because I haven't really seen this ever in another game. The players are essentially trying to get certain sets of cards in order to build up trees on their own personal forest board, then also gain different animals and food for those animals to unlock special abilities that they'll use to their advantage and try to create the best ecosystem compared to their opponents. Another really cool mechanism that I love in this game is that there are cards that can cause you negative effects, and these are going to be showing up in those piles of cards as you look at them, adding another layer of decision making. Because if you're adding those cards to your hand, you could end up with a negative effect, but there is also the opportunity to turn some of these negative effects into a positive effect, or even direct them to your opponent if you're able to combine them with other cards of the same type, or even combine them with some other cards. Like I said, I love push your luck, and this game has 2 different ways that it does it, so this is a game that's really up my alley, and I pretty much need to add this to my collection. The artwork and table presence is all fantastic with this because all the artwork looks amazing, and then you also have those 3D tree tokens that will get taller and taller as you find the appropriate cards in order to grow those trees. And this giveaway is going to be for the deluxe edition of the game, which gets you the core game as well as additional artwork and all unlocked stretch goals, but it's also going to get you die-cut forest boards and wooden tokens to replace all the cardboard tokens that are provided in the core game. All you have to do to enter this giveaway is leave a comment down below and maybe let us know what your favorite forest animal is. For myself, it's always been the wolf. I don't know why. It's just so cool. Maybe it's the stoic thing again, where they're just out on the prowl in silence. But they're also one of the most terrifying animals, and I would never want to run into one of those in the wild. But if you are able to enter, just leave a comment down below with the hashtag Canopy. But we still have more giveaways, and the next one is going to be for a great family-friendly game. And this one is a deck building game where players can actually play as different characters from different stories, such as Peter Pan, Dorothy, Alice, or even Nemo. And you're going to be playing through all their different worlds, going up against different challenges and rolling for different skill checks, and following through a overall campaign. Each chapter is going to have players going up against a final boss, and this game does open up the door for a little bit of role-playing because there will be one player that's going to be reading a card to you anytime that you end up faced with an event, and they're going to be presenting you with different options, and it's going to be up to you to decide how you want to handle that, and then of course dealing with said consequences. And this giveaway is going to be for the Kickstarter special, which gets you a copy of the game and all unlocked stretch goals, and under this giveaway just leave a comment down below with the hashtag story. And as always, you can leave any comment that you like, but if you're looking for a suggestion, maybe you could let us know what your favorite childhood story is. For myself, there are a ton of great classics out there, but I don't think any of them can stand against my absolute favorite, which is, of course, Green Eggs and Ham. I swear I read that book like 8,000 times when I was a kid. And the next giveaway we have is for another deck building game. And in this one, players are going to be starting with essentially the same deck, but depending on the character that you're starting as, you're going to get a few special cards added to your deck as well. There's a few different cards that you can get, and you can use them to upgrade your character, but of course also to attack your opponents and defend yourself. But what's really interesting about this deck building game is that there is a spatial element to it as well, because players will be moving around on the board with a token that represents their character, and you'll be able to perform different interactions at the different locations that you discover. But something that's really cool about this is that it is a battle royale, which means that the board is actually going to be getting smaller and smaller as the game goes on, making a smaller area for players to move around on, creating much more danger since all the players are going to be closer to each other at the end of the game than they are at the beginning. The game offers a few different ways that players can win, with one of those of course being the last player standing. But if you do want to know more about how this game plays, definitely recommend checking out this video right here, because whoever made this video is freaking awesome. And this giveaway is going to be for the core box pledge, which is going to get you the core box, but then also all unlocked stretch goals. And under this giveaway, just leave a comment down below with the hashtag rivals. But if you are looking for a suggestion of what to say in that comment, this one's going to be a little bit more challenging, but maybe you could let us know who your favorite set of rivals are. I mean, I watch a lot of anime, so a few suggestions that I would probably pick would either be Vegeta and Goku, or Sasuke and Naruto, or you could even go as far to choose myself and that Brian guy from Game Brigade. He beat me once in a game of Crokinole, and I am going to hold that grudge for the rest of my life. I was planning to save this one until next week, but we do have a lot more giveaways to come, so why not? Let's just do it now. And this is going to be for a pledge for Beast Shattered Isles. So this is another game that I am super interested in, and it's been really hard for me not to back this campaign. But I really do need to add a hidden movement game to my collection, and it also has the best theme of any hidden movement game ever, because who doesn't want to be a warrior hunting these mythical beasts? And in this game, one player is going to be playing as that beast, while the other players are going to be playing as individual humans trying to take that beast out. Each beast and character in this game are each going to have their own set of unique abilities and playstyles that you'll be able to mix and match in various ways. But there's also a contract card that's going to be defining the various win conditions for each of the games. There's a lot of variety to be had with this one. But the beast is essentially going to be moving around in secret on the main board, only revealing itself to attack livestock, which it can use to level up in different ways, or to attack one of the players if there is one that happens to leave themselves vulnerable. Players will be using action cards in order to perform their various abilities and move around out on the board. And of course, all the other players will be moving around on the board as well, trying to predict and decipher where the beast is going and what location they're at in order to try and set up traps or attack that specific location, inflicting damage on that beast if they are correct. But this is a really interesting hidden movement game because I think it does do the genre a little bit different than all the other options out there, because in this game it's not really clear who's hunting who, because both the beast and the humans are very formidable. There are reasons why the beast may not want to run. But this giveaway is going to grant you a copy of the core game as well as the brand new expansion, which is going to be adding a bunch of new beasts and characters and even new maps into the game. And this is another giveaway that I'm going to send you over to another channel to enter, because I did do coverage for this campaign back when it originally launched, and I did provide you with all the additional info that I could regarding the expansion with the information that I had when I made that video. But it's really nice of Studio Midhull to provide a copy of the game along with the new expansion for this giveaway, so I really do appreciate that. And I feel like I want to do them a little bit more justice on this one and at least give you some more details on how the game plays by a couple of content creators that can do this way better than myself. But you are going to have to bear with this. As always, Shut Up and Sit Down did a fantastic job reviewing this game, and they'll give you all their comments and opinions in this video, as well as how the game actually plays. And I'm pretty sure that all their content is funded by their Patreon supporters, so they do just give their own honest opinions, and they have played this game at multiple player counts and multiple times, so I think that they have a really good grip on how the game plays, and they will give you the recommendations on how to play, their preferred player count, and things like that in order to get the most out of this game if you did already back it or if you plan to back it now. Or if you happen to win this giveaway. And all you have to do is leave a comment on their video, and just make sure that you do leave a comment with the hashtag Beast, because there are already a ton of comments on this video. In addition to that, you can leave any comment that you like, but I always do like to see comments that do show support to these other content creators. So if you are looking for a suggestion, maybe you could tell Quinns just how great he looks as a cat, and maybe recommend some other animals that you'd like to see him show up as in future videos. Good luck in the giveaways, but now let's go ahead and draw the winners for last week's giveaways, and we had a lot to go through. So there was Mycelia, as well as Haggis and Tricktakers, Fromage, Rogue Angels, and also the Isofarian Guard. To draw a winner, we'll use this fancy application here, which we'll draw from the comment section of last week's video. And all these extra entries down here are bonus entries for my Patreon subscribers. If you do appreciate all the work and effort that I put into these videos each and every week, feel free to check out the Patreon, which I have linked in my description below. I really do appreciate it. It does make a really massive difference, but if you're looking to help out the channel in other ways, I do appreciate a like and subscribe, or even to share this with some of your friends that you think might be interested in knowing what Kickstarters are coming, or even just to enter in these giveaways, because we do have quite a lot each and every week, and I know a lot of people would be really excited if they knew that these giveaways actually existed, because I don't really do a great job of marketing myself. Let's go ahead and draw those comments and draw a winner. And the first one we're going to be drawing for is a pledge for Mycelia. So let's go ahead and draw a winner. And the winner is William L. Iverson, who is one of our Patreon subscribers. Congratulations, Will. I'll reach out to you and let you know that you won a pledge for Mycelia. But now let's go ahead and draw the next giveaway, which will be for Haggis and Tricktakers. And we'll do the exact same thing here. So I just updated the hashtag to Haggis. So let's draw those comments and draw the winner. And the winner for their choice of Haggis or Tricktakers is Tony Nayugan, and this is another one of our Patreon subscribers. So I'll reach out to you and let you know that you won yourself a pledge for your choice of one of 2 trick-taking games. And the next one we'll draw for is Fromage. And we'll once again do the exact same thing here. Update this to Fromage. Draw the comments. And draw a winner. Francesco Prampolini. That is a really cool name, and this is one of our viewers, so congratulations on the win. Francesco says thank you, and you're welcome. I'm happy to help you win a pledge for Fromage. This looks like a really exciting game. It's one that I backed, and I think it's offering a really unique experience. I hope you like it. And I should thank you as well for just tuning in and checking out these videos, because it really does make this channel what it is today. So I'm really happy to be able to send a pledge your way. And the next giveaway we'll draw for will be Rogue Angels. So let's hop back here, update this to Rogue. Draw the comments and draw a winner. And the winner for Rogue Angels is Jacob Bazil, which is one of our viewers as well, who happened to win a giveaway way back that got them some bonus entries into these giveaways. So it's nice to see those get checked out. So I'll reach out to you and let you know that you won a pledge for Rogue Angels. And last but not least, we have Isofarian Guard. So let's go and update this to Isofarian. Draw those comments and draw a winner. And the winner for Isofarian Guard is Magnus Jacobson, who is one of our Patreon subscribers, and it does make me happy to see this name because Magnus has been a patron ever since I was a wee small channel, and he hasn't won a giveaway yet, so this is a really nice entry into the winners table. So congratulations, Magnus. I will reach out to you and let you know that you won a really awesome pledge for Isofarian Guard. And that's everything I have for you this week, and hopefully this isn't another video that breaks over an hour. I think we should be able to stay under it, but we'll see after I finish up the editing. But one thing I have been doing is looking into some of the analytics on my channel, But what the analytics tells me is that people are jumping from game to game and just watching kind of just a few seconds and then skipping on to the next part. I do expect this to be the case since you're probably going to spend more time just watching the campaigns that you're more interested in. It's just not really able to be visualized in a view like this where it's aggregating all the views together. So I do want to be considerate of both those cases, providing enough info for the campaigns that you're most interested in, but then also trying to be maybe a little bit quicker in my explanations so that there's less content to skip. I know I personally like to watch videos that I can just hit play and watch all the way through, and I would like to create videos like that for you, but I know that isn't always the case when I'm going over such a diverse amount of content, and no one person is probably going to be interested in every single game that I have to mention. But I'm wondering if I can keep a game explanation limited to about 1 or 2 minutes, if that would improve the overall experience, or if that would be cutting too much out and preventing you from being able to get enough information to know if a game's for you. And that last point is the reason that I started this whole channel to begin with. I just want to provide information so that all of you can make the best decisions for yourself when deciding which games you think you might be interested in. So I don't want to limit my content too much that we lose out on that. I've always been trying to keep these explanations in as small as time as possible, just devoting as much or little time that's needed for each of the individual games. Some take longer than others, but when I do rewatch my videos, it seems like there are some points when I go into a little bit more detail than I think is needed, and I'm not sure if that's adding or decreasing the overall value. So it could be something worth exploring, and I could try just throwing that hard limit of 2 minutes and see what kind of content I end up coming up with, although that is still pretty difficult because every time I film these videos I end up doing a lot of retakes, so it's kind of hard for me to even judge how much time I've spent on it. But if I can cut down on the overall content put into these videos, that could translate into less time filming and less time editing, although that's not a guarantee because it could take me more time putting in that extra effort to try and slim these down. But if it does end up saving me time, that could open up capacity for me to do other things like more content on the channel, and I do have a lot of different ideas for videos, or even doing content with other content creators, which is always something that I wanted to do. So I am really interested in experimenting with this because if it means an overall better video, but then also allowing me to do other really fun and exciting things that I would enjoy, and also I think a lot of you would as well, that is definitely something I'm interested in. If you have any thoughts or ideas or concerns, definitely feel free to leave them in the comment section below, and you can even include them as part of your comment for the giveaway. That's cool as well. But yeah, I'm just interested to hear any feedback you have or any ideas or anything that you think I could do better on the channel. But other than that, I do appreciate you checking out these videos, and as always, keep that shelf cluttered and the table full.
What?